The Mali conflict since the coup in March has kind of been unreported in a lot of media. Can you help set the stage for the coup, not only the coup itself, but the events that happened afterward, and who exactly are the groups that are actively participating in the conflict? We know it's the Tuareg rebels in the Maghreb, but is there any other kind of active participants in there?
Well, I mean, I think there are three kinds of things which maybe we can say four. I mean, I guess let's see how that goes. That somehow provides, I guess, a context for understanding the coup and what follows. The first one, of course, is the long-standing, Tuareg rebellion, which was geared towards seeking independence or autonomy for the northern part of Mali, for a host of reasons, political, cultural reasons. Why the Tuaregs, have never really accepted being part of, Mali of itself. So that has been going on, and I think that provides a context in the sense that, as the military or the Malian military loses ground, it provides, reasons for discontent within the military and so forth. So that's one kind of context. But I think the more important context, I think, is the destabilization of the Northern African region, in part, due to, the fall of the Libyan regime and the movement of combatants and, militants, weapons, and also, the wider, if you wish, vacuum in the north that have actually allowed, that is it is Sahel part of Africa, which has allowed, Islamists to gain more grounds, building upon some of the economic and social problems that are there. So that's a second factor. But I think the movement of heavily armed people from Libya, aggravates, if you wish, or hinders the ability of the Malian military to deal with the situation or to contain it, and of course, that becomes a source of discontent. The third element, I think, is the nature of the economic and social conditions, and to some degree political conditions in Mali of itself. Now, Mali was a democracy, but we have to understand that mostly what we mean by democracy is governments that are elected by, through some kind of multi-party elections that we generally assume to be free and fair. But that doesn't really touch the essence of what most of the citizens are really looking for. People don't just want elections for the sake of elections. They want elections with the hope that the governments can, improve their economic and social conditions. And I think in many ways, the government that existed in Mali, like many others, didn't actually succeed much in improving things like good governance, improving economic and social conditions, and so forth. And the third, I guess, context, which may be minor, is the military of itself. I think there are a lot of reasons why coups happen, and in rare cases or in some few cases, the military can actually be, can justifiably, if you wish, take out a very bad government, and of course move quickly to restore democracy. That happened before in Mali. When the former dictator was deposed. But I think in this case, there's an element of lack of, if you wish, professionalism or, sufficient civilian control over the military, which I think allows for the military to, use various problems as a pretext to actually seize power. So I think these are like the four kind of things which sets, if you wish, a condition for understanding what what happened there and what has been going on.
You talked about how with Libya, the arms. Would you say that because the Tuareg rebels in the Maghreb they're heavily armed? Would you say that they got some of that armament from Libya? Do you think that you can trace that back to the fall of of Gaddafi?
Well, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know all the intelligence reports, but I think based on a lot of credible media reports and talking to people that are if you wish familiar with events and so forth, I think it's clear that when the Gaddafi regime fell, I mean a lot of actually fighters. By the way, I mean some of Gaddafi had recruited fighters from the Sahel, including the Tuareg areas. So a lot of those actually withdrew, and when they withdrew, they came out with weapons. So yeah, so there are actually some, I think, fairly credible information that suggests that people withdrew from Libya with heavy weapons, and some of those heavy weapons have actually ended in the Sahel.
You talked about how the Tuaregs never felt like they never accepted themselves as part of Mali, and a lot of them claim that they face discrimination within Mali. How valid do you think this claim is? How real is that discrimination?
Well, I mean, I think it is a fair claim, but again, one has to put it in context. The discriminations, or if you wish, nepotism, favoritism in politics is very widespread in many actually developing countries. Multi-ethnic, diverse developing countries. When you have a state that is actually not well developed, again by that I mean in terms of its institutions, its bureaucracy, its procedures, its the infrastructure of the state, when it is actually not well developed, you add that with a history of colonialism which was built around divide and rule, empowering one group, as a way to exert, colonial domination on all the groups. And when you do have a context of dictatorship, again, which Mali was for a very long time under Moussa Traoré, what you often have are political systems that actually thrive on nepotism. Now, nepotism is actually, it's doing, I guess, it's favoring, one group in the distribution of political and social goods over others, and that's a very common thing in many African countries. And in that sense, I mean, I think, but this is not just true for the Tuaregs. I mean, there are many other groups in Mali too that may have actually felt that. Because I mean, the ruling class or the ruling the government, the leadership of the country didn't, come from the area. I mean, they may have actually lost out. So I mean, I think it's a fair perception, to have.
How aware do you think the military was when they did the coup back in March? How aware do you think they were of the Tuaregs starting an uprising in the north? How do you think that they thought that it was a real possibility and a real threat to them, or do you think that the Tuaregs just kind of seized on this? It was a sudden thing. It wasn't planned in advance. They weren't I guess, waiting in the shadows.
Well, I mean, the conflict in the north has been going on. I mean, the Malian military has been engaged, and I think before the coup, I mean, that conflict did intensify. In other words, I mean, the combination of the Islamists and the Tuaregs, did actually intensify very much and put a lot of pressure on the Malian military. So I think it may be, as I said before, I mean, the lack of professionalism and civilian control over the military may have actually explained why the military exploited the situation to engage in a coup. But I think I don't think it is. It was a fabricated situation. I mean, there was a genuine security problem there, and the Malian military was actually losing ground.
There have been reports of individuals destroying shrines to saints and mosques and what UNESCO is calling fanaticism. I think it was in Timbuktu.
Right.
Who is? Do you think that who's pushing for the not only this kind of ultra fanaticism where people are destroying these shrines and to the saints and some of the mosques? Who's kind of adding fuel to the fire and not only doing that, but also pushing for the strict institution of Sharia law? I mean, that's led to the two stoning deaths and a few several amputations in the north. Who is this? Is this at the heart of the Tuareg argument, or is someone kind of commandeering their push for independence into this kind of fanatical ideology?
Well, I mean, information from the area is still sketchy, but I think one convincing narrative of what is happening is that the Tuareg had a long-standing conflict with the Malian state, which was simply largely, I mean, a secular question of autonomy and political independence. Now, what happened is that Islamists, again, keep in mind, I mean, there has been, Islamist, if we wish, expansion in Northern Africa and Sahel for some time. I mean, you can go back to Algeria, I mean, the feast and, back, I think, in the 1990s. So, I mean, there has actually been Islamist, again, by Islamist, I mean radical Islamist expansion in Northern Africa. So what happened, at least one of the credible narrative, is that those Islamists, in the wake of the fall of the Libyan regime, actually did came, to northern Mali, and they formed an alliance with the Tuareg. Now, this, of course, for the Tuareg, I mean, it was a way of actually helping them fight the government. But I think what the Tuareg later on learned is that, I mean, they do had, if we wish, different agendas. While the Tuareg had a much more political agenda, the Islamists had a much more ideological Puritan kind of agenda. So after I think that alliance seemed to be actually crumbling, and I think most of those things that you mentioned, destruction of shrines and enforcement of some kind of strict interpretation of Islamic law, that actually is not. I don't think it's from the Tuaregs, but rather it is from the Islamists who have actually come there.
So, do you think that if that agreement is crumbling, do you think that it's going to start becoming a kind of a three-front kind of conflict within Mali? Not only the Mali government or the Mali coup leaders and ultimately the military fighting the Tuaregs, but also the Tuaregs fighting the Maghreb or the Islamic militants who are trying to institute Sharia law. Do you think it's going to start? Do you think that it could, I guess, evolve into that kind of situation where you have three parties all fighting against each other?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is that tendency there. I mean, there is that possibility, and again, part of the issue here is that this, this is not just a Mali issue, especially, I mean, the Islamist angle of I guess of the security issue there. So yeah, I mean, there's a real possibility here that we do actually have, two kinds of conflicts. One is the outstanding conflict with the the Tuaregs, and the other one, of course, is if you wish, the Islamists who are actually in Mali but also in some other places. So we do have three parties here. Now, for the Islamists, I think we tend to look at it through large. So for the Tuareg community, we tend to think of it in the mode of civil war, and for the Islamists, we tend to think of it in the mode of terrorism. And in a way, we in some ways, we fight those war or those issues differently. Conventional civil or traditional civil wars versus what has actually been called terror through counterinsurgency and those sorts of things. So, but I think that is a real problem there. I will even go further and that it is not just having a three-way battle in Mali, but also actually one that a three-way battle that is beyond the borders of Mali.
Okay, and kind of, do you think that, kind of speaking back to that, do you think that the Tuaregs will possibly, maybe, ultimately, do you think that the Tuaregs will team up with the Mali government to try and push the do you think that's a possibility that they could end up siding with the Mali government, kind of working to a deal where they could possibly get more autonomy in the region or something else to try and push the Islamists back, or the fanaticals back?
I'm not too sure. For now, it seems that at least one of the strategies there is to actually have ECOMO, the West African regional organization, ECOWAS, fight the Islamists in particular. So the question as to whether the Tuaregs are going to form an alliance with the Malian state and fight the Islamists, I think we'll have to wait and see. But one of the things that is imposed is that, well, can the West African states come there, understanding that, there's a potential for regional insecurity to actually fight the Islamists, so the deployment of ECOWAS troops. Right. So I think that's one way to actually see it, when West African states will actually say, well, we're going to fight the Islamists. Now, on the question of the Tuaregs, whether this will provide a window when, the Tuaregs can see, if we wish, their interest in aligning with the government and carrying out a deal. I'm a little bit skeptical on that. Simply because, what they want really is independence. I'm not too sure how much autonomy will actually meet their demands. And you can see in many other cases across Africa, when people really want independence, usually they don't, any promise of autonomy wouldn't actually somehow satisfy them. You can go back to Ethiopia and see, the war with Eritrea. You can see Sudan, Southern Sudan. So I'm a little bit skeptical as to whether the Tuaregs will be satisfied with any promise of autonomy, partly because, those things can be revoked. But I think my own... and I understand that, a lot of people actually are reluctant to, if you wish, to see the secession or the breaking of a state into two as a solution. But honestly, I think, sometimes, we overemphasize the sacredness of states. Sometimes we tend to assume that, well, if you break a state, the worst is going to happen. But I think the people of Mali, especially the people in the south, I think they need to really ask seriously the question as to whether it is whether the fighting is actually what the effort to keep the north as part of Mali. Especially if really the people in the north do not want it. Now, of course, you can have a situation when the north secede, and then it becomes, if you wish, a place where maybe you can have it, terrorists can have, or they can be doing things which many people will not like. But in terms of the security of Mali, I mean, I think Mali has to reconsider whether it may not be simply to their interest to actually let the North secede if they want to.
Mm-hmm. And then you talked about the ECOWAS troops. There's 3,300 that are planned on being deployed to the area to help with the conflict ongoing in Mali. One thing that's kind of just blatantly obvious is that where the Tuareg rebel, where the fighting is going on, is in the middle of the Sahara Desert. How is a military campaign really going to be that effective, or is it going to be ultimately futile from solely from the geographical problems that it's going to face? And there was an article that quoted that was discussing it, that the Mali troops were basically training on trucks that were going across shrubland, and that was the closest thing they could get to desert-like conditions. Is a military campaign going to be that effective in those conditions where the troops are not used to, and they're not trained for that kind of combat?
Well, a couple of things. The first is that ECOWAS military operations, at least going back to Liberia and Sierra Leone, and to a degree in Mali too, I mean, they have actually tended to be based on, if you wish, the model that the wider international community has an interest in what is going on in those places. And because of all the politics and difficulties of Western powers to contribute troops, West African countries are ready to contribute the troops on the understanding that Western powers and other interested parties will help with the logistics and funding. So I think there's also, if we wish, maybe I think the ECOWAS position here is that, I mean, they can supply the troops, but I mean, what they will expect is that the wider world, I mean, or Western powers in particular, can actually help with the logistics, especially, I mean, since there's a dimension of Islamist terrorism, which the U.S. and other countries have an interest in. So that's one of the assumptions there. The other assumption too is that because, I mean, this is this is not just so ECOWAS intervention is not necessarily just really to address the Malian issue, but more importantly, it is to actually address the Islamist infiltration in Northern Africa, and as such, the success of that will actually require, again, broad international support. I think so far, I mean, international support hasn't really come forth, in any significant way. I mean, I think largely because of the budget crisis that we faced here, maybe. But I think that's something that we'll have to see how it plays out. Mm-hmm. It is true that, of course, I mean, ECOWAS's military capacity is not that very, very great. I mean, even under terrains that are familiar with them. For example, again, Liberia and Sierra Leone show that, I mean, despite a lot of efforts, I mean, still ECOWAS resources were not enough. So I guess the hope here is that ECOWAS is actually, laying a groundwork for which will then, bring in more international support and hopefully address the issue of radical groups in militants in the north.
Okay, and so ECOWAS, when the coup first happened, ECOWAS did not recognize the new government. How does this affect their recognition, their claims for recognition? Does it legitimize it? Does it how? I mean, it's kind of taking a step back from the actual conflict. But how does it does this conflict and the intervention not the intervention and the interaction from ECOWAS with the government, does it legitimize their claims as the legitimate government of Mali?
Well, ECOWAS and the African Union as a whole, I mean, over the past decade or more, has actually taken a policy of not tolerating military regimes. So the standard policy is that wherever there's a military takeover, that government will not be recognized. That has been somehow kind of policy now. Now, in the case of Mali, I mean, what I think what ECOWAS did follow the same procedure, but they introduced, if you wish, some kind of flexibility. And as you know, I mean, the military regime, in principle, is not in office. Part of the deal. So, I mean, ECOWAS gave an ultimatum. I mean, part of the deal was that the military regime has to step down. And the concession was that, they don't have to hand over power to the president that was deposed doesn't have to be restored because, I mean, he was almost out of office. But instead, I mean, they will go through the constitutional procedure when, I mean, the speaker of the parliament will step in as the president. So, I guess ECOWAS went a long way to enforce its policy of non-tolerance for coup. So, at least on paper, I mean, the government that is there is not the military government. Now, one can argue that still, at the back of it, and at the back is the military power, but ECOWAS is actually supporting, if you wish, the civilian government, that succeeded the elected president.
Okay. And you talked about so the United States has offered to send advisors and kind of people to help coordinate and to help pretty much coordinate and advise the ECOWAS force. And France has been the only real vocal advocate for the ongoing conflict in Mali. And they aside from Algeria and then some other Western African nations, what are the implications for the international community for ignoring the situation and the conflict? What could happen if this is pretty much left alone and not given the dire attention it definitely needs?
Well, I think it's bad. One can imagine a lot of possible scenarios. Ones that will be very catastrophic, ones that will be almost benign, and things in between. I think at the most basic level, I mean, the expectation that has actually emerged over the past 20 years or so is that wherever civilians are actually being victimized by a force, either be their government or a military force that their government cannot, is incapable of if the government is in either victimizing civilians or incapable of protecting civilians, then the international community has a moral obligation to protect those people. So in that sense, I mean, one can say that right now, I mean, the people of Northern Mali, the civilians there, do need to be protected, and since the government of Mali is not able to do so, then it is incumbent upon the wider international community to protect them. This is actually what the United Nations have claimed to be the right to its right to protect, and as in a way to what they call the responsibility to protect. So I think in that sense there's that moral obligation there. Beyond that, I think again I don't know how far, I mean, this radical Islamism that is actually growing in the north. I mean, I'm not too sure to what extent it will directly impact other countries beyond the region. A worst-case scenario, one can see that it becomes a haven for, a safe haven for terrorists to Al Qaeda and other people to come. I mean, like Afghanistan or Somalia. But I think that would be a worst-case scenario. What I think is more likely is if those groups actually grow in those areas, is that they will carve out territories wherein, they will impose their own interpretation of Islam and enforce rules which many people in the world will find to be, if you wish, unacceptable. And I think, again, that will maybe not so much of the security issue, but somehow it will raise the question as to whether we have a right to, the world has an obligation to, to help some of those people or to prevent what some is perceived to be as cruel and treatment of people. So that's what I see as the real danger there. Another possible scenario will be that, these guys will control places there and they will, establish power and more or less, do things according to local cultures in a way that doesn't really bother too many people. So, all of those are possible scenarios there. But again, the degree to which it affects the rest of the world depends on the extent to which they facilitate, global terrorism, or the extent to which they engage in significant abuses of human rights.
Okay. And then the last question about Mali, and I don't mean to keep you up late. If you need to,
that's okay.
Okay. So the last question on Mali, and then we're going to do 6 or 7 questions about Nigeria. So the last one about Mali is so right now in the Sahel there's this drought and there's a continued drought and the recent and the subsequent famine from it. How is this playing out in conjunction with that? Is it exacerbating the situation? Is it pretty much is it really having an effect on not only the conflict? Is it having an effect? Is the drought having an effect on the conflict? But is it also having an effect on the famine itself, getting aid to the people who need it within the Sahel?
Well, this is just a situation of actually having two kinds of disasters or two kinds of crises at the same time. You have the natural crisis, the water kind of ecological kind of problem, compounded by violence. So the two, I think. The two together, just creates a much more bigger problem. I don't think that the drought actually reduces the war. I think if anything, it just compounds the humanitarian challenge there. And you're right again, it makes it difficult. The war will actually make it difficult to provide whatever kind of assistance will have been done.
Okay. So now on to Nigeria. So we have pretty much 2 main clashing parties here. You have the Christians in the southern half, and you have the Islamists in the northern half. You also have Boko Haram. Can you help set the baseline for what's going on there? This is another kind of, and this has been a lot. This has been a lengthy conflict that's going on within Nigeria. Can you help set the baseline for what's going on? Kind of give an overview of the conflict for a lot of the people who don't actually know what's going on.
Well, Nigeria actually has various conflicts, and they are all not necessarily one and the same. And I'm not too sure whether I can actually successfully account or frame all of them here, but one of the conflicts that has actually, so again, these are political conflicts which often turn violent, but in many cases they just remain political conflicts without actually being violent ones. So that's a point worth not taking. One main part of the conflict, which goes back to the dawn of independence back in the 50s and 60s, is actually what one can call conflict among the three biggest ethnic groups, which coincide with the North-South region for political power and control of the state. So you have the North, the Hausa, Fulani on the one hand, and you do have the Yorubas in the west, and you have the Igbos in the east, and the Yorubas and the Igbos make south. So that's one dimension of the conflict, which I think that part of it has actually reduced significantly. At least since 2000. I think since the the fall of Sani Abacha regime. I think that part that has decreased in terms of political violent conflict. The other dimension of this political conflict is actually grievances from ethnic minority groups, mostly in the south, in the oil-producing areas, who have actually, on whose lands most of the oil come from, but they have actually been excluded, at least in significant ways, from political power and as such access to the resources. And you saw those things manifested through a series of violent protests in the southeast. Again, going back to peaceful demands for Ogoni rights with Kensa Oriwa, and most recently, of course, other parts of the southeast. So you do have that kind of conflict, and that one mostly entails conflict between minority groups and the Nigerian state, that is the Nigerian military. These are the purely political issues in violent political conflicts at the national level. You do also have, especially what is called in the middle belt of Nigeria and to the north, you do also have conflicts that are sometimes, that pits people of different groups, either along ethnic lines or along religious lines. And many of those conflicts are actually localized conflicts. They are over local issues. They are not necessarily over national issues. Of course, national issues may provide a context, but for example, those are like conflicts over land, conflicts over local governments, and those sorts of things. Okay? So you do have that dimension of the conflict, especially in the middle belt of Nigeria, and those conflicts tend to be, they come and go. When they come, it leads to 2-3 days of violent clashes with some tens to hundreds of people dead, and it ends. Kano, for example, was one very place where those things used to often happen. More recently, what we have also seen is actually the emergence of violence that is associated with radical Islamists. Okay? And this violence is largely, if you wish, a conflict between people of, people who actually have a very, I guess I would say, strong and radical view of Islam, in the north versus the Nigerian state. Okay? And this actually fits into the trend that we're seeing about the surgence of radical Islam in the Sahel, Northern Africa area. So all of these are actually various strands of conflicts, violent political conflicts that we see in Nigeria. The one that is sharp right now is the Boko Haram thing, which is radical Islamist conflict with the Nigerian state, and there are speculations that it may be connected with the wider network of jihadists in the Northern Africa region. But irrespective of where their logistics and their inspirations and their ties come from, there are actually local political and social grievances that actually fuels those things. So, for example, in the case of Boko Haram in the north, they object very strongly, to the attempt of the state to actually hinder them to, if you wish, practice or I guess live life according to their cultures and their values. Keep in mind, again, Nigeria is a federation, and there's a strong tradition of sense of localism and local autonomy in Nigerian history and politics.
And then, so, because we'll be focusing on Boko Haram, because it's in my opinion, it's the most destructive one, or it's been the most destructive lately, in terms of not only physical damage but also destruction of human life.
Well, Nigeria have had the Biafra War. They had the Biafra War, but back in the 60s. There's a long history of violence in Nigeria.
Yeah. But so, as of right now, according to the Associated Press, more than 690 people have been killed as a result of the recent attacks by Boko Haram, just in 2012 alone. And they've also started to destroy the country's telephone infrastructure, cell towers, and also telephone lines, which are a big part of Nigeria. Because a lot of the articles I've quoted that a lot of the country uses cell phones and phones to not only talk to each other but also for the economy. What exactly is Boko Haram doing? What are their whole mentality is that Western culture and the West is bad, but I guess what are they trying to accomplish by destroying infrastructure that is vital to holding a state together, even if they do gain control over it? Are they? I guess what's their ultimate end goal with it? If they are trying to bring about this new state, what are they hoping to accomplish by destroying everything within that state?
Oh, well, the simple answer is no, but I think it's much more complicated than that. I think so. When you have insurgencies, wars. There are two scenarios. You can think of actually insurgents or war or fighters who hope to actually capture the state and establish their own rule. So in that sense, if the classic guerrilla warfare is when you have a movement that is seeking to overthrow a government, and once they overthrow the government, they will, if you wish, inherit the state and run it. If that is a mold, then the logic will be, well, don't destroy the things because then you'll be using them and so on and so forth. But I think the kinds of insurgencies and militancy that we see with radical ideologies, Islamists in this case, I don't think they see themselves actually in the mold of, if you wish, taking over the Nigerian state as it is on the whole and running it. So most of I think one has to see the actions again, not to justify them, but I think one has to see them simply as, if you wish, as ways of getting back to the state, as as a ways of showing defiance, as a ways, if you wish, of making the place ungovernable and so forth. So I honestly don't think that Boko Haram aspires to actually take over the Nigerian state. But rather, because part of, I guess, their dream or what they may wish is to say, well, can we actually get the Nigerian state out of our own area? And in that case, when we can do things according to our own beliefs. So I think of it more as that kind of fight. Realistically, I don't think it's gonna happen. The Nigerian state just has too much resources to. Of course, anybody can cause violence, act of terror. I think it's difficult to actually fight against terror. As you know, people can always destroy, but it doesn't actually mean that they can take over. So that's a critical difference there.
Okay. Let's see. So there's a new president within Nigeria, and Goodluck Johnson. How much confidence do you have in him? Is there a real chance for him to begin stitching together the divided state, or is this going to take a lot more? Is it going to take a lot more time and a lot more resources, possibly from outside of Nigeria, to really bring together, to kind of cease the violence, to kind of finally put a stop to the cycle of violence?
Well, Jonathan is a lucky guy. So nobody actually thought that he could have become Nigerian president. So I wouldn't be surprised if he succeeded in doing anything, the unimaginable. But by the constellation of Nigerian politics and power things, he wasn't actually supposed to even be close to that. But by a series of accidents, he is the president of Nigeria. Nigeria actually is a far much more complicated place. I don't see Jonathan Goodluck as, if you wish, that much of a power person in Nigeria. Surely he's the president, but I think there are far much more. There are too many more powerful forces in Nigeria. But I think in terms of the Nigerian political elite and the state, there's a consensus that somehow that kind of violence has to be tackled. So Jonathan Goodluck, doesn't face, if we wish, resistance in that sense. But I think whatever the approach is, whatever happens, it's not necessarily because of, if we wish, the personality of Jonathan Goodluck or anything like that. Now you asked whether I have a confidence in him. Again, I guess he is democratically elected, so in that sense he has a mandate. But one shouldn't actually think of him as that kind of like strongman president. Nigeria is a little bit much more different than that.
Okay. And what kind of role can oil play? Nigeria is a very oil-rich country. What kind of role can oil play? Can multinational corporations play with trying to bring about peace within Nigeria? Is there not a role for them to play?
No, there is actually, but it's not so much actually with the Boko Haram. Again, this is what I was saying at the beginning, that there are various strands of political violence in Nigeria. And these have been going on. The Boko Haram is just one dimension of it. Most of the violence that actually went on in the southeast, with the Ogoniland and so forth, a lot of that actually violence centered on oil. For many years, actually Nigeria was in a very big political turmoil that had not even before the emergence of Boko Haram, and that was, the people in that part of the country, saw the Nigerian state as being colliding with multinational corporations to exploit their land without, returning enough to them. So they attacked oil installations, they kidnapped, and they made the place ungovernable. Now, one of the things that actually happened out of that is that the multinational corporations worked with the Nigerian government and the locals, and developed a lot, introduced a lot of programs to actually, if you wish, reinvest some money back into those areas. To begin to convince the people that, well, look, when we make money out of oil, we also want to invest in data. Some other changes that happen in the Nigerian law is actually the way federal revenues, were distributed, especially ones that come from, mineral resources. I think there was a clause in one of the constitutions where, around 13% of revenue, mineral revenues has to go back to the state of origin. So there has actually been a lot of, I will say, improvement in terms of addressing that, environmental and social justice issue in Nigeria, and multinational corporations were very much at the center. But as you know, there are even lawsuits right now here in the U.S. Against, or there has been lawsuits filed against U.S. multinational corporations for their role in violence and exploitation of resources in Nigeria.
Okay. So, hold up. I'm trying to transform the questions into where the conversation is going. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so in tracking down, and this is again focusing on Boko Haram, but in tracking them down, they've proven that it's very difficult to actually pinpoint not only the individuals who are participating in Boko Haram, but the main group itself. The joint task force formed by the government to combat them has been accused of human rights abuses. Can you speak more to that, and then how the government can try and safeguard against still being very tough on tracking them down, but also not hurting Nigerians themselves? What can they do?
Well, I think a lot of, yeah, right. In many of, most of the attempts, to combat, acts of terrorism, a lot of, if you wish, human rights abuses are, perpetrated in the process. A lot of mistakes. We have our own classic examples. You can look back into the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and you can find many cases where, in the process of actually going after terrorists, the U.S. military has actually done, harmed civilians, and that has also been true in Nigeria. When the state security forces, in responding to the security problems, have actually gone after people who have nothing to do with Boko Haram. I think the problem really is an intelligence issue, and I think you alluded to that. The Nigerian security, I think, do not really have good intelligence on who Boko Haram is, and because I think of that lack of good intelligence, most of the strategy has been stereotypical and also to be sweeping. The downside, of course, is that because again there are legitimate, actually social and political grievances upon which radical groups actually build upon. I think there's a tendency here of actually, in a sense, giving those radical groups, helping them build their argument, because the argument is that the state and Western system is actually oppressive to us, and when the state responds with violent means, it fits into that kind of narrative. So, I mean, there's that danger there. But, of course, the practical question is really lack of good intelligence. So whether the intention of the Nigerian state is to is or not to engage in human rights violations, the problem is that they typically end up doing so because they actually lack the proper intelligence.
Okay, and then last question: anything that you want to add that you didn't think we clarified, that you didn't think we touched on that's important? Anything you want to add to the interview? And that could be either from Mali, or it can be both, or...
No, I mean, not really anything of substance here. I think we have touched on most of the issues. I think, I guess the only thing I can say is that, one really has to see, these conflicts that are going in perspective. And I think, there's a wider global discourse on radicalism and Islamic terrorism, and so forth and so forth. But I think one shouldn't actually forget that, there are some, if you wish, serious issues of, social, economic, and political justice, injustice in those countries themselves, which actually creates legitimate, local grievances. Now, the problem is that those legitimate social grievances have been found expressions in radicalism, as opposed to, let's say, what we will normally want, that is through the civil society, democratic kind of process and so forth. But I think the international response to this sort of radicalism here shouldn't actually lose sight of the legitimate parts of their grievances. I mean, there are parts, of course, which are intolerable. But I think, to focus just on what is intolerable, in my mind, will not entirely address the problem. I think what will, in part, address the problem is also to look at some of the legitimate social